Good morning, friends. Happy Friday. I had a conversation with a client, I believe it was yesterday, and she was mentioning that she wakes up in more pain in the mornings, or she has more aches and stiffness first thing in the morning compared to the rest of the day. I believe her words were, I was in agony this morning, but now it's a lot better. And this is something really common that we will hear of in the health world or experience. People will say they've more aches and pains in the morning, or they've more autoimmune symptoms when they wake up around that first hour in the morning. And this is part of what we call the cortisol awakening response. So as many of you know, around that hour or so where you wake up in the morning, you get a huge spike of cortisol, or at least you're supposed to get this huge spike of cortisol. And this gets you up and going, gets the kids fed, gets you out the door. It's really your up and go response first thing in the morning. It's called your cortisol awakening response. And then as the day goes on, this cortisol starts to drop until you hit your lowest point, and that's where melatonin starts to come in to get you into that good optimal sleep. But this cortisol response in the morning, the spike, is very, very important, because this spike of cortisol sets up your blood sugars for the day ahead. It sets up your anti-inflammatory responses. It syncs with your circadian rhythm, so then it signals the other subcategories of hormones and when they are to work and be released. It also signals your organs and their circadian clocks and when they're supposed to do their jobs. But also this cortisol awakening response sends a signal to your thymus gland. And the thymus gland then basically what it does is it scans cells and immune cells for anything that might be considered autoimmune, and when it sees those autoimmune cells, it kills those cells off. So it's very important you get this cortisol spike to not only make you feel better as the day goes on, but to address autoimmunity and pain over the day. But here's the thing, when we go asleep at night, most of us have no cortisol. Well, hopefully. It's hit and miss now with the way everything is. So we have no cortisol when we're asleep at night. And cortisol, although we hear all bad stuff about cortisol, it's essential for survival. Cortisol is anti-inflammatory. So when you go asleep at night, you've no cortisol. So people can feel a lot more pain during the night because they don't have that anti-inflammatory aspect of things. And then they'll wake up in the morning with more aches and pains until they warm up, and then the aches and pains, they subside and they feel better. That's because you've no cortisol when you're asleep, hopefully. And this is a double-sided coin, because some of us are waking up with no pain whatsoever, and that's because when we have that no cortisol, we're also getting high spikes of melatonin and allowing ourselves to go into deep sleep, deep reparative sleep. So melatonin is an antioxidant as well, and while you're getting the antioxidant activity in your deep good sleep, you're also getting the reparative action, and you're cleaning out all damaged cells and tissues too. So sleep is a huge component here. So that's where someone says, well, I don't have aches and pains. Well, that's probably because you're getting into that good deep sleep. But those of us that are not getting into deep sleep, we wake up with more aches and pains and inflammation. But here's another thing. When you have adrenal fatigue or adrenal dysfunction, or I've spoke about this a lot, where you're flatlining and your cortisol, you're just burnt out nonstop. You're not getting the spike in the morning. You're not getting the dip in the evening. You're just flatlining. You're just completely burnt out. that means then in the morning you're not getting that spike either, sending the signal to the thymus gland to go and kill cells that are somewhat autoimmune. So you're not even supporting your body to address autoimmunity during the day, let alone at night, with good quality sleep. And then we of course will have the cascading effect. If you're not getting this good cortisol awakening spike in the morning, then you're going to have blood sugar imbalances too. You'll have more instances of inflammation through the day and through the night. So there's multi-levels going on. So when we wake up in the morning, we want to have a big spike of cortisol, and then it slowly trickles off as the day goes on. But if you're not getting that spike and you feel just exhausted all the time, you're not refreshed in the morning, you're not refreshed after your sleep, lots of aches and pains and all, this is going to be partially down to adrenal issues and adrenal dysfunctions. And our first approach here is sleep. As much as you can, you need to sleep. And then we need to get that cortisol to spike in the morning. And even if that means having a really strong cup of coffee to get adrenaline to spike, so it's a manipulated, manufactured spike in the morning, we have to do that. Just 1 cup of coffee. And then what we can do is we can, for a few days, see if it trickles off by itself. And if it doesn't, then we can bring in maybe licorice tea, because licorice tea can prolong how long cortisol is in your body. So we'd have our coffee to get the caffeine spike, and then maybe an hour later we'd have our licorice tea to just prolong that cortisol. And then maybe at lunchtime when it starts to drop again, we have like a half a cup of licorice tea, so we get another little. So we're trying to drag out the cortisol, we're trying to manipulate it. And then around 6 p.m. that's where we might bring in our ashwagandha to start to push down the cortisol and allow melatonin to come up. And then in the evening, one of my favorites is Tulsi. Like, Tulsi is the hammer. It's the last bit of let's crush any cortisol that's left. And you also would be looking at timing your carbohydrates as well, because they're going to be very influential on the serotonin and the melatonin and how they work. But this is why people may wake up with extra aches and pains, and then about an hour or two later they feel fine because they've warmed up. Or these are the terms I get from clients. They feel like their body got moving and it warmed up and all, and that's because of the cortisol response. So you have to make sure you're getting lots of sleep and into deep sleep, and then you're getting that cortisol spike in the morning. And then over time, that's going to address everything. You're going to find your autoimmune issues are a lot better, but you're also going to find you start to not wake up in the morning with the aches and the pains as well. So this is why I would hope I'm notorious for saying sleep is always number one. Sleep is number one, and we don't appreciate it and we don't prioritize it, and we think we can compromise on sleep and it's just sleep. I'll be fine living off 5 or 6 hours of sleep. Well, you might be doing okay now, but watch what's going to happen in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and then you've got yourself in a hole, and it's harder to get out of that hole than prevent yourself from getting into that hole in the first place. So that's your cortisol awakening response. It's so important, not just for getting the kids up and out the door, but also for the hormonal cascade and the signaling patterns for inflammation, and for those signals being sent to the thymus to kill cells that look like they're autoimmune as well, helping your body address and flush autoimmune every day, all day, every day, as long as it's done correct. Okay, I hope you found that informative and helpful, and it helped you understand why you might have these extra aches and pains and inflammation in the morning. And have a great Friday. Bye.